1 minute ago, Britain was thrown into the eye of a political storm that few thought possible. The UK Supreme Court has just delivered a ruling so explosive, so unforgiving, that it has torn straight through the heart of Westminster. In a move described as historic and unprecedented, the court has ordered Prime Minister Keir Starmer to quit immediately over a scandal involving a concealed £124,000. This isn't gossip. This isn't speculation. This is the cold, hard verdict from the highest judges in the land, and it has sent shockwaves through the entire political system. For the first time in modern history, the judiciary has told a sitting Prime Minister that his time is over, and the reaction has been instant chaos. Panic in Downing Street, fury in Parliament, and a nation demanding answers. The ruling landed like a hammer blow. In a packed courtroom in London, Chief Justice Dame Suka stood before the press and delivered words that will be studied in political history for decades to come. Calm, precise and devastating, she declared that Keir Starmer had breached the ministerial code, concealed financial irregularities and violated the public's trust. The figure at the centre, £124,000, might not sound enormous compared to the billions tossed around in government budgets, but in this case, it is dynamite, because it represents not just money, but the betrayal of the very values Starmer built his career upon: honesty, integrity, and transparency. The irony is brutal. This was the man who rose to power promising to clean up politics after years of sleaze, and yet here he is, condemned by the Supreme Court itself for deception at the highest level. Inside Westminster, the mood is one of stunned disbelief. Only hours ago, Labour MPs were confidently backing their leader, brushing off whispers of impropriety as nothing more than Tory spin. Now, those same MPs are scrambling for cover, rushing to delete old tweets of support, avoiding reporters in the corridors, and whispering to colleagues that Starmer may be finished before the week is out. Party officials are frantically counting heads, not to see if Starmer can win the next election, but whether he can even survive the next 24 hours. One minister described the atmosphere as sheer panic, another admitted the government is paralysed. Meetings are being cancelled, aides are refusing to answer calls, and the once disciplined Labour machine is now in total meltdown. The scandal itself has been brewing quietly for weeks, a ticking time bomb hidden beneath the polished image of a Prime Minister who always spoke about decency and standards in public life. It began with a discrepancy flagged by auditors, a property in North London linked to Starmer's family that appeared to be undervalued. At first, it looked like a clerical error, but as reporters dug deeper, the story darkened. Evidence began to surface of deliberate undervaluation, a suspicious £124,000 gap, and crucially, a failure to declare the funds properly. What followed was even worse: whispers of undisclosed gifts, luxury perks, and potential offshore connections. Each new revelation tore another hole in Starmer's carefully crafted image as Mr. Integrity. Still, few imagined the courts would go this far. But today, the Supreme Court left no room for doubt, accusing him of concealment, deception, and the erosion of public trust. These were not vague criticisms. They were lethal, final, and uncompromising. The silence from number 10 has only made things worse. For hours after the verdict, no statement came from Starmer, no word from his advisors, no reassurance to the British people. Instead, the nation has watched as Downing Street descends into chaos, with reporters crowding outside the gates, cameras pointed at every window, waiting for any sign of life. Insiders describe a furious Prime Minister behind closed doors, raging that the court has overstepped its authority, while his aides scramble desperately to draft a response. But constitutional experts are clear: the court's order is binding. This isn't a political skirmish that can be spun or delayed. It is a direct command, and Starmer must obey. Every hour he delays deepens the crisis, making him appear arrogant, desperate, and out of control. Meanwhile, the streets outside Westminster are beginning to erupt. Protesters have gathered with placards reading "No one above the law" and "Starmer must go." Chants of "resign now" echo across Parliament Square, and social media has exploded with fury. Hashtags like "Starmer must resign" and "Hock Supreme Court verdict" are trending at record speed, and the anger online is spilling onto the streets in real time. From London to Manchester, Birmingham to Leeds, the people are mobilising, and the message is clear. This Prime Minister cannot survive. Even international outlets are covering the chaos live, with broadcasters framing it as nothing less than a constitutional meltdown in one of the world's oldest democracies. Inside Labour, the knives are already out. Shadow ministers are said to be holding secret talks about a post-Starmer leadership plan. Angela Rayner's silence is deafening, fueling speculation that she is positioning herself to seize control, while other ambitious figures like Wes Streeting and Yvette Cooper are quietly testing their support. The cracks are widening and loyalty to Starmer is evaporating by the hour. For years, he has presented himself as a steady hand, a unifying figure after the turmoil of Brexit and Johnson. But now, with the Supreme Court's judgment hanging over him, even his closest allies know the game may be up. The opposition, of course, is circling like vultures. Rishi Sunak has already stood in the Commons to declare that the rule of law is not optional and that no Prime Minister can defy the Supreme Court. His words were met with thunderous applause from the Tory benches. Nigel Farage, ever the political opportunist, has addressed protesters outside Parliament, warning that if Starmer does not resign, the people themselves will remove him. Reform UK is already claiming a surge in membership and donations as public anger translates into political momentum for Starmer's rivals. The stakes could not be higher. Britain is teetering on the edge of a full-blown constitutional crisis. If Starmer refuses to go, Parliament may be forced to act with a vote of no confidence. If that fails, whispers suggest the King himself could be drawn into the standoff, a scenario unthinkable in modern times, but now impossible to rule out. Britain is entering uncharted waters, and every passing minute without a resignation deepens the chaos. The financial markets are already reacting, the pound sliding, investors rattled, and the nation's credibility under strain. The irony is savage. The man who promised to restore stability is now the very symbol of instability. Keir Starmer has always seen himself as a man of the law, a former prosecutor who claimed to stand for justice and integrity. But tonight, the law has turned against him, and the people who once cheered him are now calling for his head. The Supreme Court's verdict is more than just a legal ruling. It is a death sentence for his premiership. And unless he steps aside, Britain faces the gravest showdown between law and politics in living memory. As the dust from the Supreme Court's bombshell ruling continues to swirl, the atmosphere in Britain is now nothing short of electric, chaotic, tense and unpredictable. Westminster has turned into a battlefield of whispers, betrayal and desperation. Inside Parliament, corridors that usually echo with polite chatter are now filled with frantic phone calls, hushed conversations, and MPs openly questioning whether their leader has any authority left. Starmer's silence has become deafening. Every minute he refuses to face the cameras is being seen as weakness, and weakness in politics is fatal. One insider bluntly put it, he's already finished. It's just a matter of when he admits it. The Labour Party, which only months ago was riding high in the polls and preparing for what seemed like an inevitable election victory, is collapsing from within. Letters of no confidence are reportedly circulating at lightning speed among backbenchers. Veteran MPs are furious, saying they've been misled by a leader who campaigned as the embodiment of integrity, but is now accused by the highest court of deception. Younger MPs, terrified of losing their seats, are refusing to defend him publicly. Cabinet members, usually loyal lieutenants, are dodging media requests and refusing to be seen in public. The once iron discipline of Labour has shattered into pieces, leaving the government looking like a rudderless ship drifting toward the rocks. On the streets, the protests are growing louder and angrier. Parliament Square is packed with furious crowds, banners waving, voices booming. Starmer out! Starmer out. Police have been deployed to manage the surging numbers, but the protests are spreading beyond London. In Birmingham, chants echoed through Victoria Square as demonstrators demanded accountability. In Manchester, people gathered outside the town hall chanting, "No more lies, no more deceit." In Leeds, angry citizens waved placards branding Starmer a traitor to democracy. For many, this scandal is not just about £124,000. It has become a symbol of dishonesty, arrogance and betrayal from those at the very top. The streets have turned into a living, breathing referendum on Starmer's leadership, and the verdict from the people is already clear. He must go. The media, meanwhile, is circling like vultures. Television crews from around the world have descended on Downing Street. Their cameras trained on every movement, every car, every flicker of light behind those famous black doors. Headlines scream of constitutional chaos, Starmer's final hour, and Labour implodes. Commentators who once praised Starmer's calm, lawyerly style are now mocking his paralysis. Political reporters speak in stunned tones, describing the Supreme Court's language as brutal and unforgiving, noting how it left no room for spin or denial. Even normally cautious broadcasters are saying openly that his premiership is hanging by a thread. Financial markets have joined the panic. The pound has slipped against the dollar. Investors are selling off British assets. And economists are warning that prolonged instability could plunge the country into a crisis not seen since the darkest days of Brexit. For ordinary citizens, it's more than numbers on a screen. It's rising prices, shrinking confidence, and the terrifying sense that their government is collapsing before their eyes. Starmer's promise to be the calm, steady hand, after years of chaos, has backfired spectacularly. He has become the chaos. Perhaps most dangerous for Starmer is the mood within his own cabinet. Reports suggest heated arguments are erupting behind closed doors. Some senior ministers want him to resign immediately, believing that clinging to power will only destroy the Labour Party's credibility for a generation. Others urge him to fight, claiming that the judiciary has crossed a line by ordering an elected Prime Minister to step down. But even these loyalists admit privately that the public relations disaster is impossible to contain. One advisor, speaking anonymously, said, "It doesn't matter if we think the court overreached. The people have already made up their minds. He's finished. Opposition leaders smell blood in the water." Rishi Sunak has demanded that Starmer appear in Parliament and explain himself like any other citizen would have to. The Conservative benches roared with approval, sensing that Labour is imploding before their eyes. Nigel Farage, never one to miss an opportunity, has declared that if Starmer refuses to resign, Britain will face the biggest constitutional rebellion in its history. His words were met with wild applause from his supporters, many of whom see this scandal as the proof they've been waiting for, that the establishment cannot be trusted and that it's time for a new political order. Reform UK's surge in membership and donations only strengthens that narrative. Keir Starmer stands at the edge of a political cliff, staring into the abyss. Behind him, his party is breaking apart. In front of him, the people are demanding his resignation. Above him, the Supreme Court has spoken with unforgiving clarity. And around him, the vultures of opposition are circling, waiting for the inevitable collapse. The question is no longer if he goes, it is how and when. Will he resign with dignity, bowing to the law he once served? Or will he defy the verdict, plunging Britain into a constitutional showdown that could rip apart its democracy? The coming hours will decide everything, and the stakes could not be higher. Britain now stands on the edge of a political cliff, and the clock is ticking louder with every passing hour. Keir Starmer's refusal to resign after the Supreme Court's devastating verdict has not only triggered outrage, but has also pushed the country into the most dangerous constitutional crisis in living memory. The gravity of the situation cannot be overstated. This is not politics as usual. This is not a leadership challenge that can be smoothed over in backroom deals. This is the direct confrontation of law and power, of principle and ambition, of a Prime Minister clinging desperately to authority while the very foundations of British democracy shake beneath him. Westminster has become a war zone of loyalty and betrayal. Labour MPs, once proudly united behind their leader, are breaking ranks in droves. The silence from Downing Street, broken only by whispers of frantic meetings and redrafted speeches, has fueled nothing but anger. Some senior cabinet ministers have begun resigning quietly, unwilling to go down with a sinking ship. Backbenchers are openly defying the leadership whip, stating publicly that Starmer must go or the party itself will collapse. The letters of no confidence now number in the dozens, with insiders saying Labour could face a full-scale mutiny before the week ends. For a party that only months ago promised stability, it now looks more divided, more chaotic, and more directionless than ever before. The public's fury is no longer confined to social media hashtags or peaceful rallies. Crowds are growing larger, louder, and angrier. Across London, Parliament Square has turned into a sea of placards and chants, while major cities across the country swell with protesters demanding Starmer's resignation. "No one is above the law," rings out like thunder, shaking the very image of a prime minister who built his brand on justice and fairness. The scenes are reminiscent of political uprisings from another age. Ordinary people flooding the streets, determined to take back control from leaders they feel have betrayed them. The sense of betrayal is raw, personal, and unrelenting. Meanwhile, the opposition is relentless. The Conservatives have sharpened their knives, branding Starmer a hypocrite and a disgrace to the office he holds. Sunak thunders in Parliament that a leader who defies the courts cannot lead a democracy, while his MPs cheer with glee at Labour's implosion. Nigel Farage fans the flames outside Westminster, declaring to roaring crowds that this is the beginning of a people's revolution. Reform UK is capitalising on the chaos, painting themselves as the party of integrity, and their rising membership numbers prove that message is resonating. The pressure is no longer political, it is existential. If Starmer does not step down, he risks not just destroying his own leadership, but tearing the Labour Party itself apart, handing power back to his enemies on a silver platter. But it isn't only the politicians circling, it's the monarchy. King Charles, who has remained silent, is now facing calls to act if Starmer continues to resist. For decades, the monarchy has been above the daily grime of politics, but this crisis threatens to drag the king into the spotlight as the last safeguard of Britain's democracy. Constitutional scholars warn that if the Prime Minister refuses to follow the binding judgment of the Supreme Court, the king could be forced to appoint a caretaker government or sanction Parliament's moves to oust him. The prospect of a monarch stepping into the chaos of politics is unprecedented in modern times, but it is no longer unthinkable. Britain is staring into uncharted waters and the world is watching. The financial strain is already biting. The pound has plummeted further, markets are trembling, and businesses are warning that prolonged instability could devastate Britain's economy. International allies look on in shock. This is the country that once lectured the world on democracy, now facing a constitutional breakdown at its very core. The irony is bitter. Keir Starmer promised competence, order and integrity. Instead, his premiership has descended into scandal, secrecy and collapse. Polls confirm the damage. Labour's numbers are in free fall, with Reform and the Conservatives rising fast. Nearly 70% of the public now say Starmer must go immediately. Commentators are calling it one of the fastest collapses in modern political history. A leader who soared to power on promises of honesty, now drowning in accusations of deceit. His silence, his stubbornness, and his refusal to face the nation are only accelerating the downfall. Inside number 10, aides are described as exhausted, grim, and broken. Some whisper that Starmer himself is furious, determined to fight, convinced the courts have no right to end his premiership. But his fury cannot hide the truth. The Supreme Court's order is final. The public's patience is gone and his party is already tearing itself apart behind his back. He can rage, he can deny, he can try to cling to the desk in Downing Street, but the tide has turned against him. And once the tide turns in politics, it does not turn back. So here stands Keir Starmer, isolated, humiliated and condemned. His enemies are circling, his allies are deserting him, and the people are demanding his head. The question is no longer whether he will fall, but how dramatic, how destructive and how final that fall will be. Will he step aside quietly, bowing to the judgment of the court and the will of the people? Or will he drag Britain into a constitutional nightmare that could scar its democracy for generations? One thing is certain, Britain has reached a breaking point. The Supreme Court has spoken, the people have risen, and the walls of number 10 are closing in. The man who once promised to restore trust has instead shattered it. Keir Starmer's time is running out, and when the final blow comes, it will not be gentle, it will be brutal. It will be public and it will be remembered as the moment Britain's political order was shaken to its very core.